Now it's time for Task 1. What can you learn about which countries worked together during the First World War? Now let's look at the World War I alliances. The Central Powers were Germany, Austria and Turkey. And the Central Powers were fighting against the Triple Entente. That was Britain, France and Russia. Your teacher should pause the video so that you can complete Task 1 now. Now you are really lucky today because we've managed to get you an interview with a real soldier from the trenches of the First World War. Use this to complete Task 2 and Task 3. Now then, my name is Private Johnny Fields of His Majesty's Army, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about what it was like to fight in the trenches and why we did it. Why did we bother fighting for our country? What are trenches? Trenches are big hole dug in ground basically. They're about 6 to 10 feet deep so as all soldiers can keep their heads below the line of the trench so as they don't get them shot off, because that's quite a danger in the trenches. The Germans are always looking for a British soldier to pop his head over the top so as they can shoot him. Sometimes the Germans fire artillery shells at us. These are big bombs and if they land in the trench they can cause some right damage. However, our trenches aren't dug in straight lines like those German trenches, so although it'll kill a few folk, it won't kill half as many as if one of our shells hits a German trench. Now, that is a good question. Usually about 5 days we spend at the front line, the very front trench where we're right up against the Germans facing over no man's land. However, it can be longer if the troops at the reserve trench, which is behind us, have been in a particularly vicious battle and they need a bit longer to recover or they need to build up some more men and train them. 5 days at the front can be very tiring, I tell you, because you don't sleep. I don't care what anybody tells you, you don't sleep. And the reason you don't sleep is because you've always got to keep one eye open in case the Germans come over the top and try and kill you. So, 5 days with very little sleep. I tell you now, it's not a nice way to live your life. Sorry, I should have explained myself more clearly. No man's land is the bit of land in between the German and the British trenches. Soldiers, like myself, have to cross that in order to attack the enemy. However, it can be very dangerous crossing no man's land because it's full of shell holes and barbed wire and bits of unexploded bomb. If you're not careful, you could trip and break your ankle. Well, that could leave you in a very sticky situation if the Germans come. Dangerous trenches? Aye, I should say they were. Remember, a trench is just a big hole in ground. And when it rains, that trench hole fills with water. Sometimes deep enough for a man to drown in if he trips and he's not careful. However, perhaps the bigger danger in the trenches was when it filled with water. And when it filled with water and it got into your boots, sometimes a man's foot could swell up to twice the size it normally was. That was called trench foot. And the army surgeons would cut off your feet as soon as look at you if you had trench foot. Also, there were rats. Rats were sometimes the size of your hat. They were called corpse rats. That's because they fed on the soldiers who had sadly died. That made them really, really big. That is a good question. And one that I've been asking myself ever since I left the trenches in 1918 at the end of the war. I think the 3 reasons that I went to fight were: 1, it was exciting. I signed up with my mates in something called a PALS battalion and we all went together. We thought it would be a right laugh. I didn't think I'd see any of them die. Unfortunately, I did. Very, very sad. Secondly, for king and country. I wanted to protect my country, the country I love, and the king who I serve faithfully. And thirdly, my family. I've got a loving family at home, and I've got a wife who I wanted to protect from the Germans. I didn't want anything bad to happen to her, and if I had to lay down my life in order to protect her, then so be it. I hope that answers your question. So, was it dangerous to crawl out of your trenches to attack the enemy? Well, to prove this point, we have recruited a volunteer. His name is Michael, and we've given him a paintball gun. And we said, all you've got to do is get from one side of the field to the other side of the field. What we haven't told Michael is that the other side of the field is covered in bushes, and in those bushes we have put about 10 people who are going to represent the Germans, and they all have automatic paintball guns. Let's see how he does, shall we?
Let's get across the other side of the field, should be easy.
No worries. Ow!
That was brilliant.
Horrible, that.
Well, but that accurately shows, I'm afraid, what would have happened to you in 1914. Every single German soldier's got a rifle. He can kill a man at 400 or 500 metres, no problem. He can shoot 10 times a minute. And above all, there are lots and lots of Germans. Millions of them in the German army. So these hedgerows would have been crawling with German soldiers. So it's not as easy crossing that field as you might think.
Yeah.
So basically, go back out there, run around, crawl around, try shooting, do whatever you can. Let's see how close you can get.
Ow, God, I don't know why you want me to do this. Crikey. They're in the hands. The hands are the worst bit.
Ooh. Ooh. Fair play to Michael. He is taking a lot of punishment.
Of course, if this was World War I, he'd have been cut to pieces by now.
This area in front of me, as Michael is experiencing, would have been a killing zone.
I mean, this is utterly pointless doing this. I don't even know what I'm shooting at. And I mean, I'm just making myself look more visible.
He's standing out there in the open trying to fire his rifle. The fact is, he's still a sitting duck. As well as the rifle bullets, there would have been an absolute hail of machine gun bullets. And then, on top of all that, there would have been artillery. He's coming back now. He's looking a bit dejected.
It's pointless, this.
Well, Michael didn't do very well there, did he? If he was in the First World War, he'd have been cut to ribbons. However, surely it would be easier at night time. Let's see.
I think he's coming back.
Blimey, O'Reilly.
Yeah,
It's wild out there, man.
I should have told you, basically, both sides realised you could illuminate the battlefield quite well using those flares, so they could make it almost bright as day, so attacking at night.
Now let's review your answers from task 2 and 3. Your teacher should pause your video here.
Standard weapon of the British Army during the First World War was the Lee Enfield rifle. 5 shots could be fired before having to reload, and they were held in the magazine below.
These cotton straps that went around soldiers' ankles up to their knees were called puttees, and they were designed to support the ankles, the knees, and to stop water getting into a soldier's boot. From 1914 until 1915, all British soldiers were issued with cloth caps. These didn't offer much protection, and by 1915 were replaced with tin helmets. This is a soldier's webbing from the First World War. It was designed to carry everything a soldier would need, from water to food, spare ammunition to medical supplies. The British soldier's uniform was made of cloth and was khaki green. This was designed to help the British soldier camouflage in with his surroundings. Each Lee-Enfield rifle had a bayonet which could be attached to the end of it. This was a knife which could be used with the rifle for close combat fighting. Now it's time for your teacher to pause the video whilst you complete task 5. How many sections of the trench can you label correctly? For task 6, you should try and use the information you have gained about trenches from task 5 to explain what each part of the trench was for. Task 6 asks you to try and explain what each part of a trench was for. Your teacher should allow you some time to work either in a small group or on your own to complete this task. Once you have completed the task, the next video will go through the answers for you. Please pause your video now. Right, hopefully you've now had a chance to try and work out what each part of the trench was for. Let's see how many you got correct. In our penultimate task, you will look at some of the food available to British soldiers in the trenches. You will need to watch the videos and describe why they were eaten, what they tasted like, and their texture.
Right, everyone, so very exciting task this. We're going to look at the food from the trenches of the First World War. Now, if you turn to task 5 in your copybooks, you will notice that there is 4 boxes for you to describe the foods that you would, if you were able to come up to school normally, you would be tasting these foods. However, now we've had to get a volunteer, so I have roped in our head of art, Miss Machin. Now, as you can see, Miss Machin is blindfolded, so she's going to be fed by her daughter one of 4 different foods. Now, after each food that she's fed, I am going to ask her to describe the texture and the taste of that food to you. I want you to write down what you think that food is. Okay, so let's get on with it. Without further ado, let's go for our first food. Okay, so when you finish chewing, Miss Machin, can you tell us what sort of texture that food has in your mouth?
Very dry. Very dry, a bit crunchy, but I can also taste a teeny tiny bit of, I don't know, sweetness, whether it's a little bit of fruit or not masses, but apart from that fruit, it's quite, if it is fruit, I don't know what it is, it's quite bland. There's not a huge amount to it.
Okay, so there's some bland, dry food, possibly a little bit of sweetness which could be added by fruit.
I think it's definitely, it's not something that you would have like on a main meal or something. That's more snacky.
It's like a snacky type food, possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got the texture of it. You said it's quite dry. Do you think you could eat a lot of that without having a drink?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it needs, it's a bit like, I don't know, it's a bit dried biscuity, not crackery, more dried biscuity, kind of that texture, but drier than you would think a biscuit normally would be. Not crumbly, dry.
Okay, excellent. That's good. That's your first one. Right, so I'm going to ask you, teacher, to pause the video here. I want to now describe the food and then tell us what you think this food might be. Okay, so after our first food, hopefully you got a rough idea of what that was, and we will go through all the answers at the end. Now it's time for our second food. So we're going to see if Miss Machin can describe the second food that she's going to be fed to you.
Oh, quite hard. But quite creamy, smooth. That's sweeter than the last one. Not very sweet, but sweeter. It's more, yeah, creamy, smooth, velvety kind of texture.
So you've got that it's a sweet, creamy, velvety texture. Can you liken it to anything that you might eat today, perhaps?
Yeah.
So what is it? What could you liken it to today then?
I think if I say too much, I'm going to give away what I actually think it is.
All right, okay. All right, so we won't go. Maybe we'll not do that. Maybe we'll not give that away.
It's something that it is sweet. You would have it like after a meal or something, or as a snack at break time, or it's definitely on the.
As an idea, why do you think the British Army might feed soldiers this food?
For energy.
Yeah, you think it would be so it's sort of a sweet, creamy, velvety food.
Yeah.
That they would
and
be
it's
fed
a luxury.
to give them energy, and it would be considered a luxury.
Yeah, definitely.
Is it a typical version of this food, do you think?
No.
What do you think it might be missing?
It's missing sugar.
It's missing sugar. So you think it's missing sugar? Could that be due to wartime shortages, perhaps?
I should imagine so, yeah. I mean, it's sweet, but like the other thing I tasted was sweet, but naturally sweet. This is more, it's got something in it that's making it sweet, but not overly sweet. But you can kind of get the essence of what it would taste like today.
Okay, brilliant. Right, that's fabulous. Thank you very much, Miss Machin. That is your second food. So your teacher needs to pause the video here while you describe and try and work out what that food is. Right, fabulous. So your first two foods have been tasted. Hopefully you've guessed what they are. Now, it's time for our third food for Miss Machin to try. Let's see if she can describe this one accurately enough for you to guess.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's weird. Oh, it's really soft. Soft, but sloppy. It's got a bit of a mint taste. But meaty, but not chewy. It's got meat flavour, but not meat texture. No, it's soft. No sweetness at all. Yeah, soft, sloppy, and it kind of dissolves quite quickly when you start chewing it. I like it.
So it's
actually.
something. It's like a meaty taste. It's quite soft, a bit sloppy, and it dissolves in your mouth quite quickly when you start
It kind
eating
of goes. Yeah, there's not
Yeah.
a lot of. Not a lot of
Not a lot of chew
texture.
to it. It doesn't
There's
last very long.
There's no lumps, bumps, and it's just quite smooth and quite sloppy, really. But only when you've chewed it.
Yeah.
See, it's firm at the beginning.
Okay. Right, so that's food 3. Your teacher should pause the video here to see if you can work out what food 3 is. Right, on to our final food from the trenches. Miss Machin has already tried 3 foods for you and described them. Now it's time to see if she can describe the 4th and if you can work out what it is that the soldiers would have been eating in the trenches of the First World War.
Oh my goodness. Really, really crunchy.
Sorry, I think I'll translate that for you. That was really, really crunchy.
Really dry.
It's really dry.
Difficult to swallow.
Very difficult to swallow. Do you think this sort of food would fill you up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so why do you think this might have been given to soldiers?
I think it'd keep you full for a while.
Yeah, it'd keep you full. I think this sort of food
Sticking
was
to my teeth.
designed to keep you full for a while, to stop
Oh,
you craving
very,
food.
I don't know, like a grain, like a cereal of some description.
So cereal, grainy.
Yeah, no flavour.
I think it could be like maybe wheat.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Some kind of, yeah, like what you'd have for your breakfast, I think, or your supper, or it's dry, it's
So it's a meal to sort of like
very quite, I want to say starchy, but no flavour, but smells a bit like bready, but it's not bread because it's crunchy. I know it's not bread, obviously, but yeah.
crunchy, wheaty, bready type texture. Excellent. Okay, so
Sticking in my teeth.
your teeth, and it sticks in your teeth. Your teacher should pause your video here, so as you can try and work out what food 4 was. Right, well that was exciting, wasn't it? Hopefully you worked out all 4 of the First World War trench foods, but we're going to go through it in just a moment. Let's just say thank you to Miss Machin and her daughter for helping us out with this little experiment. Now, food 1. Did you have a guess what it was? Did you work out what it was? Okay, these were dry biscuits. These dry, hard tack biscuits is what they were called. So they're called hard tack biscuits. Were given to soldiers because they took a lot of chewing, and therefore it kept the soldiers' mouths engaged for longer, making them want less food. They were often dipped in water or possibly even rum to soften them up a little bit. Food 2. Did you guess that? Food 2 was chocolate. However, as Miss Machin described, it seemed to be lacking something. It was very creamy, very, very velvety, but it was lacking sugar. Sugar was in serious low supply during the First World War. So they replaced it with things like honey or saccharin. So there wasn't a great deal of sweetness to the chocolate that soldiers were sent to the front line. However, they did have a lot of chocolate sent to them so as it would keep their energy levels high. So the soldiers would eat 2 pieces of chocolate a day to keep their energy levels high. Okay, food 3. Did you work out what food 3 was? Food 3 was dead simple. It was a mainstay of the British soldiers' diet. It's called corned beef. At the time, it would have been called bully beef, and it would have come in a tin. And it would have been dished out between the soldiers. Some would eat it as it was. Some would put it into a stew or other type of hot food that they could cook in a one-pot pan, basically. You might liken it to lobby, some of the food that they would have made with the corned beef. And food 4 was dried cereal, a bit like Weetabix. And this was given to soldiers first thing in the morning. Firstly, it gave them lots of energy. And secondly, it kept them full for the majority of the day, and they would have 2 bars of this like Weetabixy type food. first thing in the morning when they woke up, usually around between 6 and 8 a.m. Excellent. So I hope you got 4 out of 4 there. Let's move on to our next task.
Task 8 asks you to combine all the knowledge that you have gained today and all the exciting things that you have learned. You are going to imagine that you are a soldier fighting in the trenches of the First World War. You are going to write a letter home to your parents describing what you are experiencing. There is a list on the screen explaining some of the things that you could include. However, there is much, much more that you can include from what you've learned today. Your teacher should pause the video now and give you at least 10 minutes to complete this task.